from the College by the Lake, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Local, regional, national, and international guests discussing the issues and topics affecting the way you live are on Forum, the North Idaho College Public Forum, with your host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart.
In our lifetime, there comes an occasion from time to time when we get to honor someone that deserves that in such a special way, and that's what today's program is all about. It is our pleasure to welcome back to the program. He's been on a number of times over the years, Rollie Williams, who is the head men's basketball coach at North Idaho College. For our viewers who are in other states and Canada, our guest has announced his retirement, which is taking place at the end of the 1995-1996 academic year. Rollie Williams has been a friend of the 26 years that I've been at North Idaho College, and he's served this institution with great integrity and honor for 35 years. Our guest was a student at the University of Idaho from 1956 to 61, graduating with a baccalaureate degree in the field of education. While he was at the University of Idaho, he served for 2 years as a starter on the varsity men's basketball team. He came to North Idaho College in 1961 and has served not only as the men's basketball coach, but athletic director and an instructor from 1961 up until recently when he announced his retirement. In addition to that very impressive record, our guest has compiled a winning score at North Idaho College of 730 wins and 313 losses, which is a remarkably winning record. This places him sixth on the National Junior College Athletic Association coaches. In addition to that, he's been honored on many occasions. For example, he received the NJCAA Hall of Fame recognition, the Idaho Hall of Fame, and he was 3 times the Regional Coach of the Year in 1969, 1978, and 1980. Most recently, he received the Scenic West Atlantic Coast Conference Coach of the Year for 1994. He was born in Kellogg, Idaho, is a native of this state, and as I indicated, has served in all these capacities, and I'm sure during the interview he can indicate to you that when he came to North Idaho College in those days, and he continued to do so, served in many, many different capacities. I've often said of my friend Rollie Williams that no one has served at North Idaho College that put in more hours than he has. Not only was he here each day, but he traveled with a team and was gone oftentimes all weekend and way into the night traveling in the areas, and also even served in the summertime. Rollie, we wish you well upon your retirement, and we thank you so much for coming and giving us this chance to honor you today on a magnificent record at North Idaho College.
Thank you.
And I'm very pleased to welcome 2 people on the panel to question our guest today, and Mr. Williams can talk about many philosophies that he holds that will be of great wealth to you who are young and are participating in sports, and you who are also coaching, and for people in life in general about how one does succeed. First of all is Steve Schenck, who is the Dean of College Relations and Development at North Idaho College, and next to him is a very close friend of Rollie's, David Cohen, who teaches sociology, but also been deeply involved with helping the coach with recruiting and supporting of the players as they've been here over the years. And I shall ask Steve Schenck to commence today's questioning.
Thanks, Tony. Rollie, Tony's given us a little bit of an introduction of you. I know you're not the kind of person who really enjoys talking about himself, but I wonder if you would, for the benefit of our audience, take us through your early career in basketball, how you got interested in the sport. Tell us a little bit about your playing days and what attracted you to the coaching profession.
Well, I to begin with, Kellogg High School, where I lived, was predominantly a boxing was a big thing, and football, of course, and basketball was not one of the major things at the time, and they dropped high school boxing, so that kind of moved people into looking for other avenues, and basketball was just something that seemed to fill a void between getting ready to play softball in the summer and football. And we had a YMCA in Kellogg, which allowed us an opportunity to go down and just practice. We'd swim, and baseball was available through the Y. And we ended up with quite a number of kids at a particular time that came through Kellogg. 1954, I was a sophomore in high school, and we finished third in the state. And at that time, there were 2 divisions in the state of Idaho, A and B. That was the highest Kellogg had ever finished in the history of the school in the state playoffs. And I'll never forget coming back from that trip. We were down in southern Idaho, and we came across the Montana border. State Patrol was there to meet us, escorted us back to Kellogg. And there was one straight stretch, and if you've been familiar with the roads in northern Idaho in the old days, there weren't many straight stretches. And I remember looking out of the back of this little bus, and there was a line of cars as far as I could see, which was something that just really stuck in my mind. And Kellogg was a great town for the support that they had. Well, we continued on in 55. We won the state championship. Actually won the championship in North Idaho College Gymnasium in 1955, my junior year. And then in 1956, we won the state championship again. So in 3 years at Kellogg, we were 68 wins and 7 losses, and had a number of players, as seems to be the opportunity over the years where you just come along. And I think at one time we had about 4 or 5 guys from Kellogg at the University of Idaho, which is where I went to school. And the tradition said it as such, that if you were an Idaho person, you went to the University of Idaho. So I ended up at Idaho and played there, and had an opportunity to play for Coach. My first coach was my freshman year, Clem Parberry. Then I had Harlan Hodges was my coach my sophomore year, and then my junior year, Dave Strack came in, who later went on coached at Michigan. And then Joe Cipriano was my coach my senior year. So I had quite a variety of introduction to coaching styles at that time. And I just rather evolved, I guess, into the interest in basketball. And I was drafted by a professional team my senior year at Idaho. And I decided that I was going to go try out for this team in Los Angeles, recognizing that I wasn't that good of a player, but I also didn't want to be in a position where for the rest of my life I could have said I could have done this, because I'd heard a lot of this when I was growing up. And I thought, well, this is not going to happen to me. I'm going to go down, and I don't expect to make it, but I'm going to give it a real shot. And while I was there, I was called about the job at North Idaho College because it was opened late, and this was in October. So I was vacillating back and forth between going back to the mines for 1 year and waiting till a job opened up, or to take the job here. And the more I thought about it, I thought, well, it looked pretty good on my resume to have a junior college job. And I had pretty much decided when I was at Moscow that the highest I wanted to go was the junior college level. I liked the level, and I saw what was happening on the Division I level. So that never really appealed to me that much. So that's how I ended up here, with the idea of being here 1 year, and that's 35 years ago.
I interrupt before I get to David. I said I came to stay about 2 years, and the same thing happened, really. David Coyne.
Well, I was going to ask Rolly, Tony mentioned that you had been inducted into the Idaho Hall of Fame and also the NJCAA Hall of Fame. You never say anything about that. You've never really made any public comments about how you felt about those honors. Would you like to share those feelings now?
Well, as you're aware, David, talking about feelings becomes very difficult, and to try and explain just exactly how it feels to be honored by people in your profession and well, the people you love and that you're around, is always it's beyond words, and that's, I guess, as much as I could tell you.
David is so correct that you've always been a person about yourself a few words, because you're very modest, but that is one of the very attractive qualities about you. Really, when we've had you on the program before, you have some wonderful philosophies about life and how sports fits life in general. Would you take a little time to share with our viewers, if you take a sport like basketball or other sports, and what it teaches, and make a parallel between what players learn from the sport and about how to cope with life?
Well, there are so many things that can be learned, and many lessons. The old adage of comparing football to life is really true. I think to be a good football player, it's not a matter of just going around and knocking people down. The real secret is getting back up. So in football, if you're going to be a good football player, you learn that if you're going to succeed, you have to get back up off the ground because you're going to get knocked down, and I think that's true with life. You're not going to win all the time. I think in basketball, as with any sport, there's a great parallel, and you just have to think about things that have been meaningful for you in your life. And the one thing that I would suggest that they all hold in common is that the more meaningful something is to you, most generally the harder you've had to work to accomplish that goal. And one of the things that strikes me today for our young people, there's not many opportunities for people to work hard like there was in the old days. You could go out and buck bales or dig a ditch or something like that. You have some concept of what hard work means, but in athletics you can see the result of it. The kid that works the hardest usually will develop the skills and start to enjoy some success. There's a tremendous correlation between hard work and success, and the things that are meaningful you've had to work hard for.
I think you built a bridge. My next question, and I'll go back to the panel. When I was introducing you, you have a remarkable work ethic, and people from your and my generation, others, this has been true, and I don't think this is as true in the present time. While you were at North Dakota College, as I indicated, you were the men's basketball coach. You were head of the physical education department for many of those years. You were athletic director, and you taught, and you had to do recruiting and all that. Steve and I were talking about this other day. As people are being replaced as they retire, oftentimes 2 or 3 people have to be hired to do their job. What is the difference in work ethic from the past to now, other than what you've already said?
I think one of the values of being raised as I was in the Silver Valley, one of the things that was a must there was to give a day's work for a day's pay, and also the concept of making shift. You had to make sure you went to work. So with the background of that, I think starting here and doing what I did never really, I think from the one standpoint it was never a job. And I don't know if the younger people can relate to that today. I never looked at my position at North Idaho College as being a job. I never thought, well, I'm down here for 12 or 14 hours a day. That was just, there was something that had to be done, and you did your best to do it.
Steve Shink.
Looking back, really, to those early days when you were coaching, you would have been, what, about 21 or 22 years old when you took your first head coaching job?
22.
22 years old. Was that kind of a shock? Were you ready in your mind now that you think about it, or did you have to make a lot of beginner's mistakes?
Well, I made a lot of mistakes, and was I ready? I don't know if I had time to think about it too much. I had so many things that had to get done, and I look back right now, and when I think of some of the things, I explain things to people. I coached baseball and track at the same time. I don't know how I did that because I knew very little about either one of them. But I had some of the students approach me and ask me if I would do that, and I explained to them I don't know much about it, but I'll give it a try, and that's just kind of how we went through things. I was talking with somebody the other day, and it seems that a lot of things in my life have been rather in a serendipitous manner. I've just kind of fumbled through, and things have kind of came out all right.
Again, in those early years, what did you do to try to teach yourself how to be a very, very successful college basketball coach? Was there someone else besides those 4 coaches you played for that you modeled yourself after, or was there someone else in the area that you followed that you learned from?
I had to rely, I think, initially on books. The videos and movies and things of that nature weren't that prevalent as they are today. The first thing that became very obvious was that I had basically played inside as a forward and a center most of my career, so right off the bat, I've got guards asking me questions, and a realization hits me. I don't really know what guards do, other than dribble the ball down the floor and get it to the forwards and center, I guess. So my first bit of study was trying to find out what guards do, and it was kind of strange because in a short period of time, I felt more comfortable dealing with guards than I did on the positions that I'd played. So books, to answer your question, were my main source, and of course, you always try to attend as many clinics and listen to people and get a chance to talk. This is a conversation that would come up with some of the older coaches and when we get together, and the difference between what we have today. In the old days, you couldn't get 4 or 5 coaches together without having napkins and X and O's flying all over the place. This was a very common thing. The younger coaches today don't seem to be I'm not saying that they're not studying, but it seems to be their sources are different. Right now, you can get on video some of the greatest coaches and some of the greatest coaching strategies and techniques ever used. So it's available to them. In the old days, we had to rely on each other for a lot. The camaraderie was really great between coaches. We all miss that, the older coaches.
David Cohen.
Well, you mentioned some of the early influences, coaching influences on your life and how you approach the game of basketball. But you've been here for 35 years. Can you single out any particular individuals over that the 35 years here at North Idaho College that have had a major influence on maybe the way you teach, your philosophy about education, that maybe wasn't in the athletic area?
Well, I think one of the things I've always enjoyed about North Idaho College, and something I'm going to miss, will be the association with the people that are. This has always been a tremendous advantage to me to be able to talk with people such as yourself in sociology and Tony and in political science and people in psychology and so on. For me to try and single out individuals, I'll certainly miss somebody, but I think the first man that I worked for, Perry Christensen, I respected him a great deal. He was, I learned some very basic things from him, and in that particular light also was Ray Stone. Ray was my boss, my immediate supervisor, but I don't think I've ever had anybody that could chew me out as tactfully as Ray could. To get me to do whatever he thought I had to do, but to do it in a manner that I know he loved me. And that's a very special gift. And there are a lot of just great people at this school that over the years that I met and had to my advantage, the association with these people. I couldn't name them all. There are just so many names that run through my mind that I'd be remiss if I tried to do that. And I don't mean that Perry and Ray were the only people that influenced me, but they were two in a position of authority when I was younger that really helped me in whatever I was trying to do, I guess.
For our viewers who are not familiar with North Idaho College, Ray Stone was the Dean of Instruction at North Idaho College, and Perry Christensen was the president of this institution when you came. The next question I have really has the rather impossible one. It's kind of like having 6 or 8 children and somebody saying which one is your favorite. And I'm not going to do that to you, but I do want to say to our audience that when Rollie Williams came to North Idaho College, he really started this whole program. It was a church league, basically, and he's brought it to a very prestigious program in which our team has won the regionals and it's been to the nationals, and as you can see from this record, is a remarkable win-loss record. And to prove this point, when he decided to retire, there were applicants from all over the United States for this position, and it showed the quality of the program. But I do want you to take a little time, Rollie, and tell us about identify a little bit about the different types of teams. I've had the pleasure of seeing a lot of those, and they're not all alike. Some teams are taller than others, some are faster and all. Just kind of give us a profile of the kind of teams that you've had, and then if you had your most ideal team, what would be, not the individuals, but what would be the makeup of, do you prefer a defensive team or a high-scoring team?
That's a very good question, because when you start back, I was just thinking, I started coaching in the 60s and we're in the 90s now, so I span about 4 decades in style. And the athletes today are much bigger, stronger, faster, much more skilled. So when you look at things today, the physical abilities of the modern athlete is just amazing. But when you go back in time and you look at people, I've been asked to try and put my all-time team together. I said, well, it's something I really couldn't do, because I think there's a time and circumstance and people within their own time and a particular style of play that's prevalent. I think probably what's more interesting, as opposed to looking at the teams, would be to look at some of the ideas that the players had when they came to the program. As an example, in the 60s, and this would reflect my own attitude as a player, players didn't question the coach. I mean, you tell a player to do something and he would do it. He'd say, run through the brick wall, and they would attempt to do that for you. And then we went through various stages in time where people question everything, and it's been kind of, I don't want to say a roller coaster, but there have been so many different approaches that players have. And I suppose the rebellious period when we had some of the Black Power movements and the long hair and things of that nature were prevalent in sports, and I don't look at them as being negative. It's like kids would ask me after a while, well, why are we doing this? And it occurred to me, if I couldn't explain to them why we're doing something, then maybe I shouldn't be doing it. So it wasn't a negative thing, and it wasn't a thing where they're trying to be smart. It was just that period that they were going through. And I think the interesting thing is trying to be able to adjust to the players as they change and you come through. But there's certain qualities about players that will never change. You find some individuals that just have a heart that's just unbelievable. I mean, just tremendous courage and just give you everything they've got at all ages. And it's interesting, if I look back at the players that really stick out in my mind, they're not necessarily the most talented basketball players. They would be people most generally that would just give you everything that they had and just were really dedicated people to that singular thing that they might be doing at the time.
That's all you can ask for, really, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
One more follow-up question is, I've always read you as a coach that loved very specific plays and disciplined plays and defense. Has that changed over those 4 decades? Are teams much more offensive oriented now and higher scoring?
I think they are because of their abilities, again, their physical abilities. Running plays and running fast or whatever, it really is so much geared on each individual team. There are some teams you like to have a little more control over. So that's when a lot of plays come in, when you want control. There are other times when you want them just to go and do the best with what they've got. Some teams run very well. 69 team we had was a team that, and I used to tell them once, we get them running with us all over. And they look to run, so you let them run, let them go. But other teams were more effective when you put them in a control situation. And I don't think that would change necessarily in years. That's just the personality. You have some people you want to control a little more than others.
Steve Shink.
Rolly, is the game fundamentally different now than it was in the 60s when you started? I mean, we talked about X's and O's a while ago. You're saying that coaches get together. And in answer to Tony's question, you just talked about having to build a strategy around each team's personnel. But has the game itself changed much in 35 years?
Yes, very much so. The game today is much more scientific. It's a much more scientific game than it used to be. And I think a lot of that has to do, that might be an oversimplification when I say scientific, but the things that are available today to analyze the game and to prepare yourself for the game is so much more available today than there was in the old days. You can turn on your television right now and watch a Division I basketball game just about every night of the year, during the season. In the old days, I can remember when you were lucky to see one good game on Saturday at 3 o'clock, and everybody waited for that. So kids now get a chance to watch things, the number of games that the professionals play, and a lot of times you'll see instruction on television about some basics from some of the best coaches in the country. So there's just so much more available to them. I think that's the one thing that struck. We were more seat of the pants when I first started. I didn't have any method to film. We didn't film it in those days. Didn't have the money to film. Didn't have television things. So I get used to the idea of just sitting there watching a game and trying to figure out what was going on. And you're really watching two phases of a game at the same time. Their offense and your defense and vice versa. So you kind of get that ability to just observe. Much more scientific,
David Cohen.
Rolly, you started our basketball program here at North Idaho College, and you were also, I believe, the first to really recruit from outside the area because we were tied to the National Junior College Athletic Association. You've seen the evolution of the community's attitude toward, say, recruiting African American players and so forth. How do you compare today with the initial recruiting back, I assume, in the 60s?
Right. Much more tolerance today. I think people are more aware of the diversity in our country, and especially as it's related in collegiate athletics. Things have changed quite a bit over there, much more accepting, I would think, about particular things. My philosophy has always been to recruit the best athletes I could recruit. And I never really bothered myself too much about where they were from or what color they might be. I don't know if that answers your question. I think that things are different today, and not just in Coeur d'Alene, but across the United States.
We're getting fairly close on time, and a name I've heard you talk about, and I finally got to meet him at a program honoring you, was Charlie Brown from Indiana. Coaches like yourself who've been so long, you get these wonderful ties to other people. Tell us a little bit about Charlie Brown, and he sent you players over the years from Indiana.
Well, I would like to try and explain that this was a very organized manner in which we first became acquainted, but as with many things, it was, I happened to know a head coach who had an assistant who went to school with Charlie Brown's wife. So I was asking him about players, and he gave me Charlie's name in Indianapolis. Said, if you want to know about players there, just call this guy and tell him I said to call. So that's how it started.
Well, that's such an interesting story. We have your spouse with us, Sherry Williams, who's always at every game. And Sherry, will you come out? We have a little something we want our viewers to see. Ladies and gentlemen, we have prepared a cake, a small cake here. It's a nice white cake with strawberry. And when the program is over, this is Sherry Williams, the spouse of Rollie Williams. We're going to cut this cake and enjoy it among not only us, but our crew. We're finishing our soon our 24th year on television, and we'll kind of jointly do this to honor you and then let our crew share in this cake. We're really excited about that. And Sherry, I want to say to you in front of Rollie that we thank you for all the time you've given up, which is a lot to share him on so many hours with this institution, with the students. And I want to thank Rollie personally for all that he's done for students at North Idaho College for 35 years. And there are a lot of women and men that have gone to North Idaho College that are a lot better people because you have guided them through all these programs you've headed, and we're deeply grateful to you. We want you to come back on this program, be with us, and as a great friend, we thank you from the bottom of our heart.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have been honoring Rollie Williams, the coach of men's basketball for 35 years at North Idaho College, and I'd invite you to be with us again next week at this same time when we will yet discuss another issue. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
The North Idaho College Public Forum was videotaped live from the studios of Instructional Technology on the campus of North Idaho College for viewing at this more appropriate time. We invite you to join us again next week for another all-new edition of the North Idaho College Public Forum on this public television station.